Anytime you let someone anger you, that person has control of you. Yeah. If you allow people to piss you off, whoever it is, they have control of you at that point. You're basically, if someone angers you, you're basically saying, oh, here's the keys to me. I'm going to let you piss me off anytime and ruin my day anytime you want to, just by opening your mouth. So you got to look at life as saying, hey, if I allow my anger to consume me, I'm basically saying, hey, somebody else controls me. Boom. If people anger you, you're saying this person has the keys to me and knows how to, elicit responses in me. Yeah, it's a tough pill to swallow some days. But, the thing is that, like pretty much anything else, can change. Anger is one of those things that you've got to learn how to look at people. And you got to learn to look at people that whenever people are pissing you off and say they don't know any better. That's how I get by with it a lot. They're ignorant of their ignorance at that point. And a lot of them, they really truly are. It's about knowing that whenever you start improving your life, that everybody else isn't trying to improve theirs. And a lot of them, honestly, it seems like are trying to have a worse life. Because everybody sees on TV how you're supposed to respond to things. You're supposed to swell up and act like an asshole. That's just how you're supposed to do it. But guess what? That doesn't work. Sometimes the best response is no response. Anger is one of those things that, and as you start letting anger out, it builds on itself. And anger is one of those things that if you can ever prevent the emotion in the first place, that's how you win. It's about not getting pissed off in the first place. And I can go pretty good some days. And then some days, yeah, I can still blow up pretty good occasionally. And the thing is after I blow up, it's like, well, that didn't do any good. And I know it didn't do any good. Except for me, sometimes it is good for me to get something out because, well, if I don't get it out, it does sit there and fester. And sometimes you can let out a little bit of anger, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. You can kind of let out the initial response, and then sometimes it'll just go away after you let it out a little bit because you're just like, and that's generally what happens with me. Anger management is one of those things that's hard. It's a nuanced approach, to say the least. Anger is something that's easy in theory, to deal with, but in practice, it's hard to deal with. I mean, it's very hard to deal with. So, you've got to look at things, and the easiest way that I find to deal with other people and not getting angry with them is to say, they don't know any better. And most of the time, like I've said, you're right, because they don't know any better. Once you start finding out the tools of anger and how to not get angry, or how to be assertive so you don't end up having passive aggressive anger, which is even worse. You've got to learn what anger is, what elicits it in you, and the proper response. A good response, a healthy response. See, responding to anger in a healthy way, that's what matters. It's all about responding to things in a healthy manner. Not necessarily the manner that your friends think you ought to take, a manner your family ought think you ought to take, but the healthy approach that you and God teaches you that you need to take. It's all about taking a healthy approach to it. An approach that's healthy for you, not for others. A little bit of anger can light a fire under you to do something or change something. And then you utilize that anger for a moment, then you let it go. But now, what about that anger that just builds and starts building toward people? Like lifetime anger. Now, and there's some people that you'll have that with. Anger that's built and built and built. And at some point, you have to let it go, or guess what that anger is going to do? It's going to consume you. So, there's different kinds of anger. There's that anger that, let's say you smash your finger with a hammer. If you get angry at the hammer, what have you proved? You toss your hammer and you end up with a broken hammer, which I have done. Okay? A lot of people have. But guess what? Did it make you feel better? Maybe. It's possible. But the thing is about learning a better way. If you smash your hammer, or smash your finger with a hammer, guess what? Find a new way to hold your nail. Okay? See, it's kind of like that approach with anything. You've got to learn what makes you angry, how it makes you angry, and most importantly, some people, they know how to press your buttons because, well, a lot of times your family, they know how to piss you off worse than anybody because they invented the buttons. Okay? So you've got to understand that looking at anger, you've got to understand how anger works, what anger is, and the responses that your body has from it. Whenever you get angry, your blood pressure goes way up. That's the biggest one, and your pulse rate goes up. Okay? So you're having a physical response to an emotional stimuli. See, that's one thing you have to learn is that it's not just affecting you from the standpoint of an emotional end. You're having a physical response, and mentally you are not able to use that space for something productive because you're looking at tunnel vision problem in front of you. See? And then from a spiritual standpoint, you're not wanting to talk to God because you're pissed off at somebody else and you're focused on that instead of focused on being a better person and talking to God. So see, you've got to look at how things work. You've got to look at whenever, a little bit here can influence a lot of things. So you got to understand that whenever you start releasing anger, you're truly releasing yourself from bondage. You're releasing yourself from a prison. You're releasing yourself from a prison of forced behavior. Because a lot of times people see that you're supposed to act out anger in a certain way. I can tell you there is no certain way that you have to act out anger. You can let out your anger however you need to. Okay? In a responsible way. Whenever you see on TV people have to get all confrontational and stuff, you don't have to get like that. You can also sit there and say, they don't know any better, and walk away. Okay? It's all about learning how to do it in a manner where you're happy. It's not about them, it's about you. And sometimes it's all about figuring out how it makes you happy, ultimately. So anger is one of those things that, I guess I'll end up starting like a series on anger here. But, whenever you whenever you get angry with someone, you're saying, I want you to control me. That's exactly what you're saying. And if you don't want someone controlling you, then you've got to learn to control your anger. You have to learn to utilize it, and you have to say, hey, I'm not going to let this make me angry anymore. And yes, it's a conscious decision. It may take you a while because at first you may just keep right on doing the same old thing. You may keep having the same responses, but after a while, you've got to say, hey, I'm not going to allow this to make me angry. And after a while, it starts losing the control it has over you. So, little steps when it comes to anger go a long way. And a little bit of action can have big results in the long run. Might keep you from having a stroke or something. And I try not to let things anger me. Some days I still fly off the handle a little bit, but guess what? I generally correct my behavior pretty quick. And I don't ever really get like violent or anything. I'll just, I get a little wordy, what to say. But, you know, I never have really been a violent person. That's just not my thing. Never solves anything. But a lot of people, that's the only way they know how to deal with their anger and get their point across. And honestly, you are not getting a point across at all. All you're doing is letting out a spew of words that aren't organized in any coherent fashion and basically do nothing. So, all you're doing is, well, making you look bad the whole time. And not that I worry about what anybody thinks, but, I worry about what I think. That's the only person I'm worried about what they think. I worry about what I think, and I worry about what God thinks. And, God teaches me how to let things go now, or how to healthily deal with a problem. Dealing with things in a healthy way makes you feel better. It makes you closer to yourself, and it makes you closer to God. It's all about learning to recognize your anger, how to deal with it, or what to do with it, and how to deal with it. Anyway, I love you. God loves you. Peace.